Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kiddushin daf Mem Hey. We're going to pick up essentially at the two dots in the middle of Mem Daled Amabet with Itmar Katana. And it's a sort of a new topic, so it allows us to sort of just dive right in. And even though most daf, if the most daf yomis will have done it, it's going to be good to review it anyway because it flows into the material that we're going to be doing over the course of today. And all of this is going to be talking about what happens if a minor girl, so let's back up and remember that the Torah allows a father to marry off his minor daughter even when she's a minor, and to perform Kiddushin, and that Kiddushin is considered a valid biblical Kiddushin. Now, of course, we don't do that today, but the reason is because one needs to understand the extraordinary poverty that existed at the time, and so when you had the ability to enable somebody else to effectively take care of a mouse in your home, that you wanted to enable that to actually happen as soon as possible. And so that was the case. But now we're going to be dealing with the question of what happens if the little girl tries to get herself married without her father's input. And of course, one can imagine that relatively easily. Kids often misbehave or do things that their parents don't want them to do. And so as a result, that's what we're going to be talking about. And then once we've sort of delved into that situation, we're going to modify it this way and that way, and we're going to be modifying it over the rest of the course of today. So let's take a look. So Itmar, Kitanish in his kadsha shaloladasaviha. So a minor girl got married without and did Kiddushin without her father's knowledge. Amar Shmuel tzricha get utzricha miyun. She needs two things. She needs first in order for her to marry somebody else, she's going to need a divorce from her first husband because maybe it was a valid marriage, and she needs miyun. Now, as a reminder, miyun is a step that that does the following. If in fact a father were to pass away, so now the father doesn't have the ability to marry off his daughter because he's not alive any longer. But the rabbi said, you know what? We're going to allow the mother and the brothers to marry off the daughter. But because it's not a biblical marriage, it's only a rabbinic marriage, we're going to allow the girl to do something called miyun and say, listen, I don't want to be in this marriage. When she gets to an age where she's able to say that, if she wants out, she could just say that and she gets out of the marriage. Unlike with the other situation where she would actually need a get. She doesn't have any even say in the matter. So as a result, that's what miyun is. And we're going to explain why is it that this situation where her father is still alive, we're going to say that she, in addition to a get, she needs miyun. But Rashi, as Rashi notes, Kedamar Taimel Kameh. We're going to explain the reason for why you need both shortly. But right now, we're just going to assume that that's the situation. And Amar Karna says, Dvarim bego. I don't understand. This makes no sense. Im get lama miyun. Im miyun lama get. Why do you need both? Meaning, if in fact it's a biblical marriage, then it makes sense that she should use a get, and a get should be good for everything. And if in fact it's not a biblical marriage and a get isn't good, and you need miyun because she's able to undo it herself, why should she need a get? Meaning, why do you need both? So Amrulay Hamar Ukva Uve Dine L'Chafrei. So hey, we could go to Mar Ukva and his court in Kafrei. So So in the end, they didn't actually go to Mar Ukva. They went to Rav, but they mixed up and they flipped the opinions. And so rather than Shmuel making the statement and Karna asking it, we have Karna making the statement and Shmuel asking it. And what happened when they came to Rav? Amar Lahu, Rav told them, Ha'elokim tzricha get utzricha miyun. By Hashem, we need to, by God, we definitely need both a get and miyun. So he was effectively agreeing with Shmuel. So the name of Hachi. And it would be terrible for Shmuel to ask a question like this. So as a result, of course, in the end, really Shmuel was saying the exact same thing. So now we have both Rav and Shmuel saying the exact same thing, that you need both get and miyun. The time of my, why in fact do you need both? This was the question. This was exactly the detail that we were going to get to, as I said earlier. So Amar Rav Acha Breida Rav Ika. So tzricha get shema nisratza ha'ab b'kiddushin. We need to have a divorce because maybe the father wanted the Kiddushin. And if the father wanted the Kiddushin, we're going to assume that it was actually a valid Kiddushin biblically. And so as a result, a get is required. So Trika Miyun, and we need Miyun because Shema lo nisratza ha'ab b'kiddushin. Maybe the father didn't want the Kiddushin, and therefore it was not a valid Kiddushin, but we still need Miyun. Now, why do we need Miyun? Because V'yomru, what are people going to say? Ein Kiddushin Tosin B'achosa. So we have this man who marries this young girl. Now what happens if this man who tried to marry the minor girl goes and marries the sister of this minor girl? Now the law is that once you marry a woman, as long as that woman is still alive, even if you divorce her, as long as that woman is still alive, you're not allowed to marry her sister. And it's such a prohibition that your marriage won't be even considered to have taken any kind of effect. It's as if you did nothing if you say Harei at mikudeshet li b'tabad zu kedat Moshe v'Yisrael. If you say that to the sister of your wife, and so as a result, people are going to think that this little girl was married to the man because she got a full-fledged get. So therefore, it sounds like she was actually married to him. And now when this man tries to marry the sister, we're going to assume that that marriage wasn't a valid marriage and that there's no get that's required at all. But that's not true, because maybe the father was not approving of the marriage and the marriage really never took effect. And so as a result, when the man now marries the sister of the older sister of this little girl, so now it is a valid marriage. So we're going to have a big problem. And so we don't want anybody to think that Ein Kiddushin Tosin Ba'achota. And so therefore, we're going to require Miyun as well. And because Miyun is required by a rabbinic marriage, we'll say that, must be that this marriage is actually only rabbinic. And therefore, when he goes and marries the sister, he is not marrying definitively someone he's not allowed to marry. And therefore, she will need to get the new sister, the older sister that gets married. So that is the explanation. So Amar Rav Nachman, v'hu sheshidchu. Now, all of this, Rav Nachman says, is only talking about where there had been an arrangement. As we know, the word shidduch, is matchmaking. So similarly here, where there had been an arrangement. So as a result, the father knew the possibility of this actually happening and had somehow indicated some approval ahead of time. Ula says, afilu meyon eina tzricha. Really, you don't even need meyon. Now the Gemara wonders, was that statement made in connection with Rav Nachman's statement? Meaning, is that true even if the father had already arranged for the marriage between these two young people? So the Gemara asks, is that true even if they had in fact already had their arranged marriage? So number one is man de masliha, lo masliha. No, it doesn't have to be. Maybe the one who taught Ula's statement, maybe that person hadn't also taught Rav Nachman's qualification. And so as a result, they could be totally consistent. And what Ula is saying is that in a general situation where it was not shidduch, when there was no arrangement ahead of time, then you don't even need miyun. Meaning you don't need a get and you don't need miyun. And why don't you need it? Because the actions of a minor have no legal significance. The actions of a minor are not a valid action. And so as a result, we're going to say that there's no requirement for miyun or a get. And Ika de Amri, there are those who say, so that would be approach number one, meaning that Ula would agree with Rav Nachman that if there was a shidduch, so then you would need both a get and miyun. However, or we could actually say that, in fact, yes, Ula's statement is that period, because the father did not actually do the action, and the action was only done by the daughter, and the daughter is a minor. We are not going to allow that action to have any legal significance. And therefore, when she does it, she doesn't need a divorce. She doesn't need miyun. She goes out and she can marry whomever she wants because she is not married at all. So now we're going to challenge that read of Ula. So Mesiv Rokana, so now we're going to first cite the first Mishnah in Yevamos. Now the first Mishnah in Yevamos deals with 15 cases of where, because remember, Yevamos is where a husband dies without any children, his wife goes and gets married to the brother. So the question is, there are 15 situations where, because the wife that was married to the brother that died can't marry, where one of the wives can't marry the brother, the surviving brother, all the other wives are exempt from the mitzvah of Yibum as well. Okay, that's what the Mishnah dealt with. And now the question is what happens if the wife that was problematic, something happens to her? The chulan imesu, in all of those 15 cases, if the wife dies, o mianu, or she performs miyun, o nisgarshu, or she gets divorced, o shenimsu islandess, or it turns out that she is not a woman, a maturing woman. So as a result, she's not going to be able to have children. So Rosei and Mutar. So their marriages are not, so she's no longer effectively married to the deceased brother, to the brother who now dies. And therefore, when the brother dies, the other wives are able to do Yibum with the surviving brothers. And so as a result, the co-wives are permitted to the surviving brother. So did Kidsha Man. So 1 second. One of these cases is dealing with a minor, because we said that we're talking about a miyun situation. So how did this happen? If you tell me that her father married her off, well, we don't have miyun in that situation. B'miyun sagila, would we say that miyun is enough? That's a biblical marriage. If a father marries off a minor daughter, miyun is not sufficient. She needs to get a real get. Exactly. So get ma'al, she needs a real get. Elalav de kidsha ihi nafsha. So doesn't it have to be a situation? Because remember, her father is still alive, because her father is the brother that can't marry any of the co-wives because the fact that she was married to the brother who died. So it must be, the Gemara proposes at this moment, that she got married herself. And doesn't that show that when a minor girl gets married herself, she does need miyun? V'getani debaya miyun, and yet we're seeing that she needs miyun. So no, it does not have to be that situation. Whom mosivla, whom mufarikla. So Rav Kahana asked the question, and he answered the question. Because what does he say? It's where she became an orphan while the father was still alive. What does that mean? So let's take a look in Rashi. Rashi helps us out here. That the father married her off when she was a minor to somebody else. Okay, Vinis Armala, and then she became a widow. Onis Garsha Bekatnuta, or she got divorced while she was a minor. Sharehi Bechaye Avia Kiyatuma. So as a result of that, since she had a full-fledged marriage, she no longer goes back to her father's jurisdiction. And the Kevan Shehisia Ein Lavia Rishusba. Since she has gotten married, she no longer is like back into her father's jurisdiction. Rather, she is like an orphan whose father has passed away. Meaning, and let's take a look, she now has the ability to get herself married. Now, It's not a biblical ability. It's only a rabbinic ability because the rabbis want to make sure that she's protected and isn't available for to be taken advantage of. And so now she marries herself off to one of the brothers of the father. Dahani Kiddushin Bo Miyun. That would be a marriage that would require Miyun. Shalo Hayala Lahamtin at Dat Aviha, because she does not have to get the imprimatur of her father. Ubimiyun sagilahu, and that's all you need is miyun to get rid of it. De'ain masa katana klum, because her action is not considered valid. Element of rabbanan, only rabbinically is it considered valid. The tikun nisuin lekatana, because they established that there should be some kind of marriage for a minor child. She'ain la'av, who doesn't have a father. Shelo yinagenu ba minak hefker. We don't want to treat her like some ownerless piece of property that everybody can take advantage of. And so as a result, that's the situation, and therefore that's the story. So we now have a situation. So we asked the question on Ula, and we answered. Ula can actually hold that when a minor who is not considered like an orphan, but just a regular minor whose father is still alive, whose father has never married her off, that situation where she's still in the jurisdiction of the father, in that situation, her action is totally invalid, and therefore she doesn't need a get, and she doesn't need miyun. And she goes about her way, exactly, and can marry whomever she wants. So that was question number one. Now we're going to ask question number two on Ula. So Mazda Rav Hamnuna challenged from the following. We have a brisa that we've seen before, Ein Mocher Lekrovim, that a father is not allowed to sell his daughter to relatives. Now, remember that the Torah allows a father to sell off a minor daughter. It is clear from the Torah that one of the potential purposes of this sale is for that little girl to marry the new master that she will have, or that master's son. That marriage is referred to as yiyud. And the question is, and the point that this first opinion is making in this brisa is that in order to be able to sell your daughter to somebody, the person must be able to perform yiyud. So ein mocher lekrovim, and so therefore you're not allowed to sell the minor daughter to relatives who are not allowed to marry her. Because they're not allowed to marry her, that means they're not allowed to perform yiyud, and so as a result, they are not allowed to purchase her. But Rabbi Elazar says no, you can sell to relatives. He does not think that the ability to do yiyud is a requirement for a sale of a girl. And so as we turn to Mem Hey Amud Aleph, we finally get to today's daf. The Shavim, but they agree, Shemokra Amana L'Kohen Gadol, Ugrusha V'Chalutza L'Kohen Hedyot. But they agree that both the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar agree that you can sell the daughter as a widow to a Kohen Gadol or a divorcee or Chalutza to a regular Kohen. And that is because those prohibitions are only a lav. They are not a kares prohibition. And because they're not a kares prohibition, we say that a marriage does take effect. If a Kohen were to marry a divorcee, that is a marriage that has legal import, even if it is prohibited by the Torah. And so as a result, therefore, because even the Tanakama agrees that the marriage does take effect, you're allowed to sell the daughter into that situation. So Hay Almana, so now that we've said this rule, Hey Chadami, this almana, this widow that we're talking about, what's the situation? Because if you tell me that the father married her off, would he be able to sell her? Of course not, because we have a principle. Once you sell your daughter into a marriage, you are not allowed to sell her into slavery. Elalav. So what must we talk about? We must be talking about a situation where the daughter married herself off, and nonetheless she is considered a widow. So that shows that that the marriage must have had some sort of effect. Karila almana, and yet you're calling her a widow. And Ula, though, says that a minor who does a marriage by herself, does Kiddushin by herself, doesn't even have to do miyun. It's not a marriage at all. So the Gemara again defends Ula. So Amar Rav Amram Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Hacha b'Kiddushay Yiyud. No, that we're talking about where the first marriage of the girl also involved Yiyud, meaning that the father sold the daughter to husband number one, and husband then, after being sold as an Eved Ivri to the first master. That master then married her, and then that master died. And so as a result, while we say that a father is not allowed to sell off his daughter after he is already married off his daughter, he is allowed to sell off his daughter after he sold her one other time. So Valiva the Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, and this all follows the approach of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda to Amar Mos Harishonos Lav L'Kiddushin, that the money that the master gives is not the money that pays for Kiddushin. Rather, the money that pays for Kiddushin is effectively the freeing of the little girl. The little girl essentially gets married on her own when she goes from the status of being a slave to being the wife. And so as a result, since the original money was never given to the father for the sake of marriage, it's not as if he's married her off already. And so a sale after a sale is permitted. And so that could be the situation that we're talking about. And so again, Ula's response of saying that a minor doesn't have the ability to do any kind of marriage is a valid approach, is not inconsistent with other statements from the time of the Mishnah. Itmar. So now we have now we begin the process of adjusting our story. So adjustment number one is, again, man does Kiddushin with a minor girl, but now he dies before any kind of divorce action happened. So what happens? Itmar, mace. And of course, he dies without any children. And so as a result, the girl is now potentially going to marry one of the man's brothers in Yibum. So Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, it was said in the name of Rav, Mima Enes Lemamaro. She does miyun for the mamar. Now, that statement is very unclear because when did we talk about mamar? Now, mamar, as a reminder, is an oral statement that is effectively like Kiddushin for Yibum. Ordinarily, Yibum is just performed by having marital relations. There's no preparatory statement, but Mamar is effectively a Kiddushin where one of the brothers says to the girl, that I want to marry you. And so as a result, and gives either a star or money, etc., to indicate that the will, that his desire, and she accepts it. And so, mama enet lizikaso, but there is no miyun with respect to the zika relation. So Ketzad, what does this mean? How does this all work out? Meaning, what does it mean that there's a miyun and there's no miyun? So now the Gemara goes through it and explains it in detail. So asa b'mamar, if in fact the one of the brothers performed mamar, well then tzricha get, utzricha chalitza, utzricha miyun. Now she needs three different things. She needs a get, she needs chalitza, and she needs miyun. Why does she need three things? So tzricha get shemanis ratza ha'av b'kedusha sheni. She needs an actual get because maybe the father liked the idea of the ma'amar and said it was good and valid for the brother to do the ma'amar, and therefore it's a valid Kiddushin, and therefore that man and the widow, the little girl, need to have a full-fledged get. And if in fact the father wanted the first marriage but not the second marriage, meaning the first marriage of the marriage to the deceased brother, well then the ma'amar is not valid, but the original marriage, the original Kiddushin, is valid, And so this little girl needs chalitza from the other brothers, from all of the brothers. And yet still tzricha miyun. She also needs miyun because shema lo nisratza ab lo b'kedushay rishon v'lo b'kedushay sheni. Maybe the father didn't want any of the kedushin to be valid, in which case this is a minor girl acting on her own, and her own actions are totally useless. And if we don't require miyun, but yomru ein kedushin tosim b'achota, people will say, well, look, this little girl got a divorce, so it must be that the marriage was valid. So it must be that if the surviving brother who did mamar with her now tries to marry her older sister, we're going to say it's not a valid marriage. But that's not true. Maybe that mamar was not a valid marriage to the widow, to the little girl. In which case, since the marriage to the little girl was not valid, a new marriage to the sister would be valid. And so we need to make sure that we don't make the mistake of saying that Kiddushin can't take effect with the sister. So as a result, we do miyun as well. So, however, on the other hand, lo asaba mamar, if we didn't do mamar, then ein tzricha ela chalitza bilvad, then only chalitza is sufficient. Why is only chalitza sufficient? Well, let's go through the situations. If, in fact, the first marriage is a good marriage, well, then chalitza will be sufficient because she actually needs chalitza. And if, in fact, the first marriage was not a valid marriage, and so as a result, we need to make sure that we know that that if the surviving brother who did now tries to marry this little girl's sister, that in fact she is that marriage is a valid marriage, and will require a get. We don't have to worry about that because Shema Yomru Ein Kedushin Tovsin Ba'achosa Hakol Yodim Achos Chalutza Derabanan. We don't need to worry about so my amrat, excuse me. So why would I say that you need miyun? Tibai nami miyun. Maybe we should say that you require miyun. No, because shema yomru ein kedushin tosim bachos. Maybe the marriage will take effect. Maybe the people will say that marriage can't take effect with the sister, and therefore people will think that the sister is not in fact married if the brother who did chalitza now goes and marries his sister. Because hakol yodim achos chalutza derabanan. Everybody knows that the prohibition of marrying a chalutza is only rabbinic, and because it's only rabbinic, everybody knows that an effort by the surviving brother who performed the chalitza to marry the sister of the widow, everybody will know that marriage actually takes effect biblically, and so therefore everybody will know that in fact needs a get, and so we don't have to be worried that people will allow that wife, the sister, to go and marry somebody else in the meantime. That this is what Rabbi taught in this connection, that the sister of a divorcee is prohibited biblically. But achos chalutza medivrei sofrim. But a sister of a chalutza is only prohibited rabbinically. So that is the next case. And so now we are ready to make another change to our situation. And now the change to the situation is not that the minor girl herself gets married, but we're going to allow her to get married by her father. But now we're going to deal with a father of the groom. And the groom can be an adult. We're not talking about a minor here. We're talking about an adult. And the father of the groom and the father of the bride together arrange the marriage. So the two men were drinking some wine under a, we'll call it, define it here. There are a number of possibilities, but we'll just define it as a willow tree as it's explained here. In Bavel. And so Shakal, and nothing good happens when two men are drinking together. This highlights Shakal Chaminayu Kasa de Chamra Yav Leila Chamre. So one of them takes a cup of wine, gives it to his friend, and says, Amar Mikachali Bir Partech Livri. Listen, marry your daughter to my son. So Amar Ravina Afil Amanda Amar Chayshin and Shema Nisratza Ha'ab. That even though when the daughter herself, the minor daughter herself, gets married, we have a concern that maybe the father really approved of the marriage. When we Shema Isratza Haben Lo Amrina. We never say that maybe the son really wanted this marriage. As Rashi says, Shema Isratza Haben, that maybe the son wanted it, but Kiddushin Shekidish Lo Ha'av, that he actually wants to be married off by his father. Shalom Midato, without his knowledge. So then we say, Lo Amrinan. We don't say that. Za'av b'kedusha bito, b'koldahu, nicha, lay. That any kind of marriage, when it comes to a father for his daughter, that is going to be good for him. Detav lemetav tandu. That the idea is that he prefers, or she prefers, that she be married. She would prefer to be married than to be alone. Aval gavra. But when it comes to a man, Dayak v'nasiv, he's going to be more discerning. Uben eno group berishusa aviv, and a son is not considered in the jurisdiction of his father. L'kadesh lo isha shelo b'shlichuso, to marry him off to a woman without actually being appointed as an agent. Okay, so now the Gemara asks, maybe the son was appointed the father as an agent. How do you know that that's not the case? So lo chatzif inishal shave alavu ashliach. We don't. No son is going to do that and make his father an agent. The Dilma artsuye artse kame. Maybe the son told his father what he wanted, and then the father went and did it for him. So as a result, we know that the son is going to be happy about it. So Amrle Rabba Barsimi, the Farish Amar Mar Delo Savra Laha Derosh Ushmuel. That Rabba Barsimi said, no, listen, I know from Ravina that he does not agree with the principle of Rav and Shmuel. So Rav and Shmuel, actually, let's take a look at Rashi. 3 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Beferish Shamati Mimenu. I heard explicitly from him. Delo Savar Leila de Rav Vishmuel. That Ravina does not agree with Rav and Shmuel. Because what did Rav and Shmuel say? They say, Choshishin Shemin Isratza. We have to be worried that maybe the father wanted it. V'kol shekain l'shema aso haben shliach. In which case, we should certainly also be concerned that maybe the son made his father a shliach. Ela im kain shamanu the amar afiu lamanda amar, and that's el eino kain. But that's not the case. He disagrees with that. Shamanu. We heard that he specifically does not say. And the Amar Afilu Amanda Amar, and that which Ravina said, hey, even according to Rav and Shmuel, who they would disagree in this, they would change their opinion in this case. L'Ravcha de Milsa. It wasn't saying, Ravina was not saying that he agrees with Ravina and with Shmuel and Rav, but rather he would say that even Shmuel and Rav would agree with him in this case. He just said this in order to emphasize the point and make it more likely that people would accept his perspective. But in fact, he would disagree with Rav and Shmuel and therefore say that we would not be concerned about all of these situations. The bottom line is we don't worry about the father approving of the daughter's marriage, and we simply don't worry about the son approving of the father's marriage in this case. Okay, so now that we've dealt with that, so the Gemara again makes another adjustment. So now, what happens? Back to our original case. Man is marrying a little girl. But now, instead of doing it in a very respectful manner, maybe even in a wedding hall, but he goes and does it in the shuk with some vegetables. So Amar Ravina, again, Ravina comes and says, that even in a situation where we worry about maybe the father would have approved it, that's only when the daughter is being treated with respect. But when it comes to treating her with embarrassment and treating her in an inappropriate manner, so then it would not be a valid marriage. So Amrle Rav Acha Midifta Ravina. So Rav Acha asked a very good question. We had two elements in this story. We had Bizayan Demai, E Bizayan de Yarka, E Bizayan de Shuka. Is what was the meaning in our case the fact that the man used vegetables, or was it the fact that the man did it in the marketplace? And nafkamina. And there's a difference between the two, because if we say that it was a situation where it was the vegetables, well, then the kaddish b'kasbeh b'shuka. Then if they got married with money in the marketplace, then that would be a good marriage. And if the problem is the shuk, the chisha de yarka bevesa, or if they got a bundle of vegetables and it was in the house, then what would be the halacha? So Amrle, Idi Derek Bizayanu. Both of your examples, both the case of marrying with money in the marketplace and marrying with vegetables in a house, both of those are considered demeaning, and none of them would be a valid marriage. Okay, so that's the next case. Okay, so now we could just go. The Gemara discusses a case where we have the parents disagree as to whose family the daughter should marry. And finally, the husband agrees to the wife's approach and he makes a wedding, but then the husband's choice sneaks in and does Kiddushin. Do we say that because the husband wanted it in the first place, it's going to be good or not? So let's take a look and we'll deal with that case. So the man says, I want her to marry my relatives. Vehi amra likriva. And she says, no, I want her to marry my relatives. So kfate ada amra la tehevi likriva. And finally, the wife got him to say that it will be her relatives. So ada achle v'shase. Then when everybody was eating and drinking at the wonderful marriage party, asa kreve v'igra v'kitsha. So the husband the relative of the husband, his relative, goes up to the attic and he does Kiddushin with her. So sneaky guy, what's the story? Do we say that because the father wanted it, as a result, we're going to say it's a valid marriage or not? So two reasons to say it's not a valid marriage, Abaye and Rava. Amar Abaye, Ksiv Sheiris Yisrael lo yasu avla v'lo yadabru chazal. The Tanakh in Sephania, Parak Gimel Pasuk Gimel says that the remnants of Israel are not going to perpetrate iniquity, nor are they going to speak lies. So the point is that Jewish people are an upright people, and so as a result, of course, having already agreed to his wife's approach, he's not going to undermine it and allow it, and so therefore he's not going to renege on his commitment, and therefore it's not going to be a valid marriage. Rava Amar, no. Chazaka ein adam torech v's'uda u'masida. No, the reason here in this case that it's not a valid marriage is because a man doesn't make a humongous wedding party for his daughter only to have her marry somebody else for whom he did not make the party. And so as a result, that's why it's not a good marriage. So my benai, what's the difference between the two? Listen, if they hadn't made the party and the father was a sneaky guy, then this would be a valid marriage according to Rava. But Abaye would say no. Jewish people are not sneaky, and therefore it would not be a valid marriage. Okay.
Maybe we're not sneaky, but dysfunctional families existed 1,500 years ago.
Yes, that is certainly true. And this case certainly highlights that. So that we would have to discuss this particular case. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to discuss 3 cases involving a minor daughter. So let's take a look. So case number 1, so again, all 3 of these cases are going to deal with a man marrying a minor daughter. At some point, there's going to be a lack of clarity about the degree to which the father approves of what's going on. So in this case, the original Kiddushin happens with the father's knowledge, so it's totally a valid Kiddushin. Now the father goes overseas. And the rest of the Nisuin part, remember that there are two stages to Jewish marriage. Both of them create a connection that requires a get. But first there's Erisin, where she becomes prohibited to everybody, and then Nisuin, where she becomes specifically permitted to her husband. So in the Erisin was done with the father's permission and knowledge. But now the Nisuin was done while the father was overseas. Not a great move, but that was what was happening. So Amarab, Ochelos Betruma Ad Sheyevo Avi Aviyimcha. That we are going to assume that the father approved, and therefore the daughter can eat truma until her father comes back and protests. But Ravasi says no. We have to worry that maybe the father will protest, and then this non-Kohen girl will have eaten truma, and that we don't want. So Habi Ubda B'chashla Rav Lahada Rav Asi. So even though Rav was the one who said that she could eat truma, when it actually happened, Rav was strict and ruled like Rav Asi, saying that she could not eat truma. Amar Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak Umoda Rav Sheimesa Eno Yorsha. Everybody agrees that if she dies because the erisin is all that has happened, the husband does not inherit the girl, rather the family, her family inherits her. So Oki Momona Becheskas Mari. So her money remains in the possession of where it was originally. Namely, because the Kiddushin, because the Nisuin was done without the father's say and permission. So as a result, we're going to leave her possessions in the father's household. And so as a result, even Rav would agree with that. So now that was case number one. Again, Kiddushin happens with the father's knowledge, but he goes overseas, and then the Nisuin happens without the father's knowledge. Now, same case as number one, except the father is not overseas. He's present. This Kansha Ladas, they get do Kiddushin with the father's knowledge. Ninis is Shaloladas, but the Nisuin is without his knowledge. But Ba'avia Khan, the father is present. He's there. So Rav Huna Amar, Rav Huna says, Ein ochels. She can't eat. Rav Yirmiyah Amar, Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba Amar ochels. And Rav Yirmiyah says, no, she can't eat truma. So what is the story? Why do they hold these positions, and how do they relate to the positions of Rav and Rav Asi that we said above? So Rav Huna Amar Ein ocheles v'afil Rav da Amar ocheles. Rav Huna says no, she's not allowed to eat truma, and that's even true according to Rav, who said when the father was away for the Nisuin that she could eat truma, because Hasam hu delo esei la'ab, because there it was the father wasn't present. So as a result, we can assume that the father would have been okay if he had been present. Aval haka de isi la'ab, but here where the father was present, hi de ishtik mirtach rasach, maybe he was boiling with anger. That's why he didn't say anything, and so we can't necessarily take any effect from his silence. And of course, Rav Yirmiyah says the exact opposite. Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba Amar Ocheles. He says that no, she can eat truma. Because and Rav Asi to Amar Ein Ocheles. And this is true even according to Rav Asi, who says that she's not allowed to eat truma when the father is away. Because Hasamhu the Shema Yavav Avi Aviyimcha. Because over there the father was away, and so now he may come back and object to the Nisuin. But Abal Hacha, we can assume that his silence is assent. And so as a result, it must be that the father was okay. And therefore, even Rav Asi, who says that you have to worry about the father's disagreement, here would not say that you have to worry about the father's disagreement. Okay, so that's the first two cases. And you now may be sitting on the edge of your seat, wondering what is case number 3 in this series? You're going to have to wait in and stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Okay, so 5.
Yasher Koach.
Bye-bye, everybody.